Hello and welcome to Building Your Best Brain podcast. My name's Sylvie, and I'm super excited to start the first episode. So, this is something that I've been thinking about for a while. You may know me as Synaptic Sylvie on Instagram, where I share short, actionable tools or little bits of information about the brain. And I've been wanting to do a podcast for a while because I want a platform where I can really dive into topics with you, speak really freely, and not be limited to the 60 seconds that you get on Instagram. I thought the best way to kick off episode 1 is tips on how to befriend your brain. And the reason for this is because this is one of the things that I struggled with for a really long time. So, a little bit about me. I have been studying neuroscience for a very solid portion of my life. I did my undergrad in neuroscience at Carleton University, my master's at McGill, worked in industry for a few years, and I'm doing my PhD. So I'm a researcher around PhD 3, which is pretty hard to believe. Time really flies. And my desire to study neuroscience is that I've always been a very curious person. I've loved science my whole life for as long as I can remember. And I've seen my family members struggle through various mental illnesses. I myself have struggled through mental illnesses. And all of this came together to really get me curious about the brain and this mysterious organ and how it's operating and how it translates into our bodies. And, despite learning lots of things about the brain, um, towards the end of my master's and even throughout my training in general, I experienced profound feelings of despair, had severe burnout episodes, was not functional in many areas of my life. And one of the kind of turning points is when I did my yoga teacher training back in 2020. And it was through the introduction of yoga, pranayama practices, also known as breathing practices, meditation, did I start to get a handle on how I could connect with my nervous system. That, you know, mental illness or trauma wasn't kind of a helpless, hopeless place to be, and that there are tangible ways and tools you can use to befriend your brain. And so today I'll take you through 5 of my tips, both with experience and scientific backing, on how to befriend your brain. So, tip number 1 is that your brain is talking to you all the time. And I say this because, when we compare to other parts of our body, such as our skin, even our heart, we can either see it with our eyes or we have different tools like heart rate monitors, the little gadgets on your watch to know exactly what's happening. And with your brain, it's in your head somewhere doing God knows what. But the reality is that our brain is sending signals to our body all the time. And so you can always tune in to your internal state, be it your digestion, be it how you breathe, how your muscles feel, to get a sense of the state of your nervous system. So, tip number 1 is tuning into your body to get a sense of how your brain is operating that day. 2 is be mindful about how you talk about your brain. Just be mindful about how you speak about yourself in general. So, the idea here is that repeating stimulation, right? So be it, a phrase you say about yourself, like for example, I'm never going to feel better, or this anxiety is completely unmanageable, I'm incapable of coping or getting better. Having that on repeat will wire up your brain in a way that it'll be easier to say those things, easier to say those things, easier to believe those things, easier to believe those things, easier for your body to then adopt what you're saying. And so, one of the ways to befriend your brain is to have an antidote thought, or basically a replacement thought. And a few key points here is to ensure that the thought is relatively short, so it's easy to say, easy to call up, that you repeat it over and over again. And so this might be difficult to do when you start. So I suggest having reminders on your phone, post-its by your office or in your bathroom, and that the thought is believable. And this is critical because as much as it would be nice to say, tomorrow I'm going to be the healthiest that I've ever been my entire life, if you're not going to believe it, your brain's not going to believe it either. And if anything, it might have the opposite effect. It might make you feel more frustrated. And one of the keys about having an antidote thought is it doesn't necessarily make you feel good, but it can take you out of that place of despair. One of the things that I kept telling myself, right, is I was kind of having a bit of a pity party, rightfully or not rightfully, that's up for debate, but that, I only have me, right? And I was kind of in a place where I was feeling really alone and kind of fixated on that fact that I was alone and that I only have me, I can only trust me, I can only rely on me. And I flipped it in a way where that statement is now comforting, where it's, I have me, I'm going to, and I have taken care of me. I can rely and trust myself, and I always have my back. Step number 3 on befriending your brain is to have small actions that you can do over time to better your brain health, right? So the antidote thought that I mentioned before is one of them. And we'll have many episodes to talk about different tools, right? But of course, there's exercises, breathing practices, meditation practices, the list goes on. But the big thing I want to emphasize is that the action is small and that you can repeat it over and over again. And it kind of lends into my 4th point, which is to avoid being overwhelmed. And so in this beautiful age of the internet, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because we have tons of information that, we can have access to, and that is, you know, relatively inexpensive. Of course, there is privilege involved in being able to have a computer, access the internet, all that good stuff. But you don't have to be a PhD in anything to be able to get really valuable information. Trustworthy is a little hard to say from time to time, but regardless, when implementing anything in your life, a new habit, a new thought, if you do too much at once, you'll feel overwhelmed and you'll feel stressed. And in a place of feeling stressed, you're not actually helping your brain kind of lay down the foundation to make those changes long lasting and to even make those changes enjoyable, right? Because ultimately, when we're doing things to better our health, it's because, we hope to feel different. We often hope to feel better. And so if you're implementing too many changes, you're likely not going to feel better. You're likely not going to feel good, and you're likely going to stop implementing every single change together. So having small repeatable actions and picking, 1 or 2 so that we avoid overwhelm. And the last tip I want to give is to stick with your intuition. So as you're, combing through all of the beautiful resources that the internet may be providing to you, again, to avoid overwhelm, you don't want to implement everything at once. And if you stick with what feels intuitive, you're likely being called to it for a reason. And again, kind of back to my, antidote thought of trusting yourself, relying on yourself, building this trust with your intuition is absolutely profound in befriending your brain and befriending your body. So don't be shy to stick with your intuition. There doesn't need to be logic involved in picking something to implement into your life out of the sea of many great options. And so I hope that some of these tips help you in befriending your brain, Throughout this podcast, I hope to share lots of different actionable ways, go through different scientific studies, also share anecdotal personal experience, and eventually, bring on experts to the podcast to continue to learn different ways to befriend your brain in a way that's accessible, in a way that doesn't, cost a ton of money, and in a way that is sustainable. So, thank you so much for sticking with me for this first episode. And I look forward to creating more episodes with you. And feel free to go to the show notes for additional resources. And I will see you on the next episode. Thank you.